To be with you during these class periods, and this is our last class period together, and there's so much to say and so much to share, and yet our time has run out, and we trust that this has been meaningful to you and that God has done something in your heart as well as in mine. We want to go back and emphasize some of the key things that we have felt were important in relationship to Christology. Our whole approach to this class was not necessarily to discover academic truth about Jesus, although we do want to learn facts about Him, but it's way beyond that. We are wanting to experience Him and Him alone. The great desire of our heart is that somehow you might be open to Him, and I want to be open to Him, and I want Him to reveal Himself to me. I want to know Him intimately. I want to know not about Him, I want to know Him. And it isn't just knowing Him, it isn't just knowing facts about Him, and again, it isn't just knowing Him, it's really knowing Him. It's having Him know me in intimacy and being totally exposed to Him until all of His life can literally bring me into what He designs and desires for me. So the journey of Christology and the development of Christology in our own life is just going to be an ongoing thing. And the attempt of this course is simply to give you a taste for it, just to a beginning step that we might launch into a lifelong pattern of investigation of the person of Jesus Christ, and that He might literally become expended in our lives in larger and bigger ways, until the unfolding of His face would take place even in the eternities, and we would know and grow in Him until I would see you in the heavenlies, expanding in Jesus and knowing Him better and knowing Him more. What a plan this is. The overwhelming joy of investigating Him and living in Him and having Him investigating us and revealing Himself to us. We have talked about that in terms of the saturation in His Word and the saturation in His person. And again, I can't emphasize how important that is. That if this has just been something you've done for this class period, then hey, this class has been a waste of time. For the whole design and desire was that you might develop a pattern. You might fall into a routine, if you please. You might get into the habit. You might develop a track of investigation through the Word and through the person. Saturating in His person, saturating in His Word. Again, I want to remind you, there's no way to saturate in His person without saturating in His Word. See, the living Word, the written Word, somehow they go together. And it's in that combination of saturation in living Word and written Word that He is able to reveal Himself to you. And that's what we're desiring. Saturating in the living Word, it's all about practicing His presence. The development of a God awareness. The absolute moment by moment by moment involvement of Him in your life. Not prayer in the morning for 15 minutes. Not a Jesus in your prayer closet that you go and meet. Not a Christ down at the church that you worship for an hour on Sunday morning and tell Him what kind of a day you had, what kind of a week you had. Not a Jesus you get down on your knees and share with Him about at the end of the day about what happened during your day and wish He could have been there to help you at that moment. But an indwelt Christ. It's the awareness of Pentecost. It's the sourcing of God within you. It's the wonder of the flow of who He is through you. It's the very envelopment of His life in and around you. It's until you see His face moment by moment, and there isn't anything that's going on in your life that He's not intricately involved in. It's that kind of experience, the practicing of His presence. It's what Brother Lawrence did clear back in, what was it, the 1600s, as he was a monk in a monastery, and realized there was no difference between washing dishes in the kitchen, which was his responsibility in the monastery, and praying at the altar. Oh, my elders, he said, my leaders, they tell me I must spend time in prayer at the altar, and that's fine. I do it, and it's wonderful. But I cannot see any difference between kneeling at this altar in prayer and washing dishes, because God is as much there in washing of dishes as He is in praying at the altar. And prayer, is it 24 hours a day, praying without ceasing, living in the flow of His life, intimately involved in Him. You see, it's saturation in His presence. How would you do that? Oh, saturating in His Word. Yes, saturating in His Word. See, the living Word, the written Word. And as you grab a hold of the written Word, you begin to experience Him. Well, let me remind you of something we said earlier in probably the first or second class period about the wonder of this Word. That when I grab a hold of this Word, I'm grabbing a hold of Him. That He's not this book. We understand that. He's not a book. Oh no. We don't worship a book. No. See, we don't get upset when people put things on the Bible because it's a holy Word of God. No. There's no magic in this book. No. It's black ink on white paper. We understand that. We don't flip the pages to ward off demons because there's no magic in this. See, it's the truth that's contained on the pages that we're interested in. It's the wonder of the concepts and the reality of the truth that's on the pages that we're thrilled about. And as the reality of the page, as the reality of the truth on the page becomes alive, we discover Him. Because the Word becomes alive within us. And it is a living, moving organism, sharper than a two-edged sword, designed to cut us to the bone and reveal the Christ to us. See, the author himself wants to live within you. And as the author lives within you, he then is enabled to begin to share the wonder of himself with you. And he explains what the Word is all about. So we're talking about grabbing a hold of the Word of God. And when I grab a hold of the Word of God, I'm grabbing a hold of Him. Again, not that He's this book, but this book is somehow an extension of who He is. And it's alive and powerful. And the most powerful truth we've got at our disposal is this Word. The most powerful dynamic truth, the most powerful weapon we've got for cutting a person wide open, for evangelism, is the wonder of this Word. Nothing takes the place of this Word. Our cute stories don't do it. Hey, our interpretation of it doesn't pull it off. What we've heard about it and our latest psychology and psychiatry doesn't get the job done. See, it's this book. It's this book. This book is what does it. It's sharper than a two-edged sword. So the living Word, the written Word, let those operate in your life. Saturate, saturate in His presence. Take a book. Take a book of the Bible, get into it, fill your life full of it, day after day after day after day, live in it, let it live in you, carry it around, hey, read it, write it down on a 3x5 card, write a paragraph down, saturate in it, pray over it, design it, desire it, eat it, get at it, dissect it, look at it, what's the main verb, what's the subject, hey, get into it, live in it, let God think through you, let your very life be exposed to the Word. So I'm challenging you. The Christology that you have will develop out of that. Hey, the living Word, the written Word, and this thing will teach you Jesus. Hey, study the Word to find Jesus. The very indwelt Holy Spirit has one overwhelming desire, Jesus said. He was going to send the Holy Spirit to do one thing, teach you about Himself, teach you about Jesus. The test of how filled you are with the Spirit is now how much you talk about the Holy Spirit. The test of how much you are filled with the Holy Spirit is how much you talk about Jesus. See, that's what the Holy Spirit does. He continually, always seems to be revealing Jesus, the revelation of the person of Jesus Christ. We've been saturating in Matthew chapter 2, attempting to see more of Jesus. There is an element I want to end this whole course on, and it's the element of joy. We're not glad and we're not joyful that the class is over. It's not joyful that this has finally come to an end. It's not joyful that we are now going to part in this relationship. It's the joy. It's the joy of knowing Him. The joy and the thrill of Jesus in your life. The joy. Did you know this passage is filled with it? There's no doubt as you get into chapter 2, verse 1 down through verse 12, that the whole experience of the wise men is somehow filled with joy. It becomes a part of the passion that drove them on and on and on and on. It's the reason they were able to maintain the maintenance of their commitment to follow Christ and to look for Him and to get at and to search for Him. The discovery of the new Christ child, that is, the new King that has been born, is all a result of this underlying joy that just was their passion that just drove them. See, that kind of experience, that kind of joy is really needed. And the wise men, of course, had that. As you begin to flow through this particular passage, as you saturate in it, you'll note that joy shows up, especially in verse 10. What a verse it is. Matthew chapter 2, verse 10. Look at it. When they saw the star, they rejoiced in exceeding great joy. Now the emphasis on joy in that verse is just too big and too great to bypass. You realize what's happened? They saw the star in the beginning, of course. It's what triggered this whole thing. The star, whatever it was, gave them the message. Somehow it all came together. It was probably a divine thing within them. It all came together that this was all about the birth of a new king. These wise men were makers of the kings. It was the total focus of their lives, of course. They were the makers of the kings, but they suddenly realized they didn't make this king. This isn't a king they were coming to crown. This isn't a king that they were coming to make. This was a king they were coming to recognize and submit to. This was bigger than anything they'd ever gotten into. So do you see how this whole message just disturbed their tradition and everything they had ever been and all they had ever thought, and literally ripped up and tore apart their whole life and their approach to things? And they're doing something brand new here. They're coming to the recognition of a king that already exists that they didn't have anything to do with. Hey, the star gave them that message, and they were absolutely convinced of it. The indication, of course, is that the star disappeared. And when the star disappeared, they were left on their own then to find this new king. They went on the journey. They traveled a year and a half, 2 years, pushing on. Probably it was about a year and a half to 2 years before they finally reached Jerusalem. Oh, they had to wander around, or they'd have been there probably a long time before that. But they wandered around, wondering, where is this new king, trying to get a handle on this thing, and finally figured out that it was a Jewish king, that he was born a king of the world, yes, but he was born as a Jew, and so they came. King of the Jews is their question in verse 2. Where is he that is born King of the Jews? So they went up and down the streets, expecting that anybody on the streets of Jerusalem would know, because they would have all heard the news by this time, that a new king had been born. And yet, when they went up and down the streets, they found no one was aware of it. Here are Gentiles knocking on the door of the Jews, announcing to them what they should have already known, but had missed. And so Herod called on the chief priests and the scribes and found out from the church what the prophets had to say. And we discovered in verse 5 and 6 that the prophet said that Jesus, the new king, the Messiah, the new ruler, would literally be born in Bethlehem. That was the place to go. It was about 5 miles from Jerusalem, not all that far. So Herod called the wise men in, and it was a secret meeting, again, descriptive of the deception that he was really involved in. And he had a secret meeting. And he tried to act so casual and tried to act interested, and he tried to deceive them, and probably he did. He told them, you go, you find this Christ child, you find this new Messiah, this king, and come back and tell me, because I'm really interested. I want to come and worship him too. You go and locate him and give me the word. Because he had no intention of doing that. As the story is revealed, he intended to kill, destroy the Christ child. Now, when the wise men left, hey, Herod was no longer in charge. Hey, the star appeared to them again. In fact, that's what happened in verse 10. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceedingly great joy. They knew that they were on the right trail. They knew that, hey, what had started this whole thing was back. They knew that the God who had communicated to them through the star was now communicating them again. And hey, they were on the right wavelength, and they followed that star. And it brought them right over where the young child was. Look at verse 9. When they had heard the king, they departed. And behold, the star which they had seen in the east went before them till it came and stood over where the young child was. And when they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. Wow, what a passage. Well, let's talk a little about joy. Joy is a delight of the mind. Joy is a mental condition, no doubt about that. It's a positive consideration of things that are going on around you. It really is a mental condition that's deep within you. So joy is not emotion. Joy is not feeling as such. But joy has to do with your mental state. Joy has to do with the consistency of how you positively consider things. When joy is in moderation, we refer to it as gladness. When it literally accelerates and becomes huge and big, we call it exaltation. when there is a contentment in your life over the possessions that you have, we call it contentment. Joy is referred to as contentment. When you really have desires that burn within your soul and you find that they are being accomplished, we call it satisfaction. And when you are in the middle of a raging battle and finally this battle is won, we call this joy triumph. And when there's a pattern in your life that's been established inwardly, mentally, a pattern in your life, when joy has become the thrust of your being and it's maintained day after day after day, moment by moment, hour by hour, through all circumstances, joy is then called cheerfulness. It's really interesting that when you come to the New Testament and even to this passage and the discussion of joy shows up, that the absence of happiness is very evident. That all the way through the New Testament there is a strong absence of happiness. In fact, as far as I could find, there is no Greek word that can literally be translated happy, because the consideration of happiness was not in the Greek proposition. It wasn't to be thought of. Because happiness was not what anybody was after. Because happiness was temporary. Happiness, from a biblical perspective, was self-centered. Happiness, of course, is self-destructive then. See, when you're talking about happiness, you're talking about a fulfillment of self-centeredness. You're talking about locking in on yourself and what you want and how you want it. And that very act itself of focusing on yourself ends up giving you discontentment and destroys all happiness. So you see, it's a contradiction in terms. Happiness that's focused on self-centeredness isn't happiness, because you can't do that and be happy, for it destroys itself in the process. So a focus on happiness literally destroys the very happiness that you're after. Happiness is a temporary emotion. It's a temporary thing that happens in the life and is soon fading. It has to do with circumstances. And of course, in the English language, when we speak the word happiness, we're really talking about circumstances, chance. We're talking about luck. We're talking about the circumstances around us have brought us some kind of feeling of happiness. In fact, we use the phrase happy-go-lucky, because that's the only happiness there is. It's a matter of chance. It's a matter of luck. It's a matter of, well, maybe it will happen, maybe it won't. Well, what's going to happen to me next? It's almost in the hands of fate itself. That's happiness. See, the New Testament isn't into that. Again, there's no Greek word in the New Testament that can be translated, literally translated, happiness, because it doesn't quite fit. Because again, happiness is a focus on self-centeredness, which is absolutely destructive of any happiness that you might have. So happiness is a non-thing. But joy, woo, joy is different. See, joy is all about, again, a mental delight. Joy is way beyond circumstances, and it's a temperament of the inner heart. Did you know that 60 times in the New Testament joy is referred to? The idea of rejoice and the idea of joy. And you get the feeling that one of the things that Christ is calling us into is joy. You get the idea that one of the fruits of the Spirit that would literally spill through our lives and permeate our love would be this overwhelming sense of joy, this consistency of this temperament, pattern of the inner soul, that it would be joy itself. Again, chapter 2, verse 10 emphasizes this so strongly. Look at it again. And when they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. Isn't that ironic? You see, what's happening is that there's such a strong emphasis on the idea of joy in this verse that, man, it's hard to bypass it. It's hard not to notice it. It's hard not to see it clearly, that he's trying to tell you something is going on in these wise men, that they've got some kind of a mental condition happening here, that there's some kind of temperament that literally operates in and through them, that this is not some kind of temporary thing. This is not some kind of emotion for the moment. This is a flow that's happening in their mind and their heart. In fact, they rejoiced, and the heart of that word is joy, you understand. They rejoiced with exceeding great joy. So there's an emphasis, a double emphasis, a triple emphasis, an exaggerating, a building, and a stretching of the whole concept of joy as he's telling you of what's going on in the inner heart and mind and being of these wise men. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. It's interesting to go back into the Old Testament and saturate through the Old Testament, and maybe you did that, about the idea of joy. Joy is all over the Old Testament, of course. I mean, it's everywhere. The most frequently used word in the Hebrew language in the Old Testament about joy is found many places, but in the book of Proverbs is one of those places. In fact, I'd like for you to turn there, if you would, to the book of Proverbs, and I'd like to read you a verse. It's really an interesting verse which gives you something of the insight into this basic word of joy in an Old Testament. Turn to Proverbs, go to chapter 13, and go to verse 9. Of course, the writer of the Proverbs, a wise man, had lots of things to say to us, and it's not surprising that he would talk to us about the condition of joy. And in verse 9 of chapter 13 of Proverbs, he says this: "The light of the righteous rejoices, but the lamp of the wicked will be put out." Now that's a phenomenal, interesting parallel. That he is literally talking about light on the one hand and joy on the other hand. And he's talking about the lamp of the wicked, the light that's in the wicked will be put out. That the wicked will know nothing about light, but it's the people of joy who know about light. What is he saying in this verse? He's telling us that light and joy have something to do with each other. In fact, when you dig down to the basis of this Hebrew word that is translated joy there, or rejoices, the idea is brightness, shining. So he's literally saying this in Proverbs. Look at it again. Proverbs chapter 13, verse 9. "The light of the righteous rejoices." That is, it shines. It's bright. It's almost like a witness kind of thing. It's like what he's talking about is joy is some kind of witness. It's the shining and the brightness of the personality and the shine and the brightness of the light of God in your life, but not so with the wicked. You know, of course, what happened to Moses. He went up into the very presence of God for 40 days and 40 nights and absorbed into the pores of his face the brilliancy of the light of God. Oh, his face was radiating. God, give me that. His face was radiating, was literally permeated with. And when he came down, hey, the Israelites looked at him and said, "Oh, your face is too bright. Hey, cover it up." And he had to veil the glory of God. That's the word here. Whew, that's the word. It's the glory. It's the light. It's the beaming. It's that's joy, man. That's joy. Had the privilege just a few weeks ago of baptizing my grandboy. He's quite a guy. My grandboy is 7 years of age, and he's been wanting to be baptized for some time. And I took him aside before I baptized him and set him down, of course, and I talked to him. I said, "I want to talk to you about baptism," and I tried to talk to him about symbol. I think he got a hold of it. He didn't exactly know what symbol was, but I gave some illustrations to him. And I talked to him about baptism being an outward symbol of the death and the burial and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. That what was happening was that when you were actually went into the water, you were buried. Oh, he said, "I see that. Yeah, I see what you're talking about. Buried with Christ." And oh, he said, "When you come out of the water, then you're raised with Christ." I said, "Yeah, that's it. That's the idea." And it's a symbol of that's already taken place in your heart and in your life. And he said that he understood that. And then I turned to the 7-year-old and said, "Hey, grandboy, there's a kind of a custom tradition that before a person is baptized, he gives a testimony. Doesn't have to be long. It can be in your own words." And he wasn't sure what a testimony was, but I explained to him, it's just telling of course, about what Jesus is in your life and what Jesus has done for you. And I told him, I'd like for you to give a testimony. What would you say in a testimony about Jesus and what he means to you and what's been going on in your life? Well, he said a few weeks ago, he said, I talked to my daddy about it, he said, and I told my daddy it was like the lights were on inside. He said, does that make sense? I said, oh, woo, does that make sense, grandboy? How could you describe the wonder of this Jesus in the inner heart and mind better than that? It's the lights have come on. See, that's joy. That's joy. That's what he's saying in the Old Testament, that this basic word for joy has to do with lights and has to do with brilliancy and has to do with shining. And oh, what's he telling us? He's saying the light of the righteous rejoices. The light of the righteous just shines, it beams, it radiates because the lights are on the inside. But the lamp of the wicked is put out. There is no light there, he says. There's other Hebrew words which are used and translated joy or rejoice or those kinds of things. And they are interesting. The root word for these other words that can be used for that kind of thing literally means to be excited. That's a good description, isn't it? To be excited, to be thrilled, in fact, it's the idea of dancing about. It's the idea of going in a circle. That's the root word for some of the other words that are used in connection with joy. I'm just so excited I can't stand in one spot. I'm just so excited I'm going in circles. It's all about dancing. Dancing. Hey, don't know how conservative you are, what the rules of your church and your belief might be, but can you imagine spending the rest of your life dancing with God? Dancing with God. Because you're just so excited. The joy is so deep within you. The wonder of who he is and the marvel of having found him and the greatness of him having found you. And see, the Hebrew worship was all about a full body worship. I've had the opportunity several times of going to and being a part of Jewish services, Jewish Christian services. Christian Jews, my. And you know what they do in their service? They have to pull the chairs aside, and they have a whole section of their sanctuary, of their worship place, dedicated to dancing. And during the song service, people will be over there just dancing, swaying, and they normally have some kind of flag thing, and they sway it, and it's a full body worship. That was the Hebrew thing. You know, it was a full body deal. See, the Greeks sat and thought, but this whole deal of the Hebrew was joy, was dancing around, was going in circles, was just rejoicing with just, can you imagine having the joy deep inside of you? Can you imagine having discovered the Christ? The lights are on inside. It's brilliant, it's shining, and you spend the rest of your life dancing with God. It's a marvelous picture. It's an Old Testament deal. The wise men, back to that, chapter 2, verse 10. There it is again. They are filled with joy. Now, no doubt you picked up again that there was a contrast between what's going on with Herod and what's going on with the wise men. You can see it. The contrast, of course, is Herod in verse 3. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. See, Herod is under distress. Herod is distressed to his bone. He's under duress. Herod is finding the lights are not on. He's a part of the wicked, and the lamp has been put out, man. It's uncertainty. It's insecurity. He's troubled. He's agitated. You know what the word troubled there means? Yeah, in verse 3, probably you looked it up. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled. It literally means agitated. I suppose the best description of that is to go to your washing machine, and there's this thing in the middle of the washing machine, especially the older ones, in the middle of your washing machine that just goes back and forth. It just constantly agitates, stirs up. It's designed for that, mixing, stirring up, agitating the clothes. That was what was going on inside of Herod. There was just agitate, just all torn up inside, just disturbed, just upset, just insecure, just uncertain. It was just agitate. See, it's something of the opposite of joy. Joy is certainty. Joy is a mental condition. Joy is a delight of the heart. Joy is a contentment in the soul. Joy is a flow of the light. Joy is the excitement of dancing with God. But Herod's agitate, 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 agitate. Nothing's going right. Agitate, agitate. You might examine what's going on inside of yourself. And everything that's happening, of course, in Herod's life can be explained from that agitate, agitate, agitate thing. Verse 4, he's gathered all the chief priests and the scribes together, and he's inquired of them where the Christ would be born. Why is he doing that? Oh, he's agitated, agitated. Got to find out, got to nail this down, got to agitate it. He's driven, you see. And of course they told him it was in Bethlehem. And then in verse 7, oh, he's got a secret meeting going on, calling the wise men in, and he's quizzing them. Hey, I want to know exactly what the date was. He interrogates them. Why is he doing that? Why is he stuck on this? Agitate, 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 agitate. See, it's deep in the soul. He can't get away from it. And oh, verse 8, yeah, he sent them to Bethlehem and said, go and search carefully for the young child, and when you've found him, bring back word to me, that I may come and worship him also. Oh, he's lying. Deceit has set in. But why did he do that? Agitate, agitate, agitate. See what's in him, what his mental state is, what his perspective is. His mental consideration is all about agitate, agitate. It determines everything he does. Oh, down in verse 16, then Herod, when he saw that he was deceived by the wise men, was exceedingly angry. Agitate, agitate, agitate. And he sent forth and put to death all the male children who were in Bethlehem and all of its districts, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had determined from the wise men. Agitate, agitate, agitate. Couldn't help himself. Slaughtering young children, boys. Agitate, see, comes from the deep internal of his heart. See, Herod is in contrast with the wise men. What's the wise men all about? Oh, they're all wrapped up in worship, man. They're falling at his feet in verse 11. They're opening their treasures. It's the delight of their life. See, this is not a momentary thing. This is the thrill of their being. See, it's not agitate, agitate. It's light, it's brightness, it's joy, it's the mental condition, it's the passion that's driven them all of this time. And when they see the young child, they fall down, they worship him, they open their treasures, they present gifts to him, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Hey, even God is able to communicate with them in divine warning in verse 12 because of this state, this joy that they've got deep within. Man, I want that in my life. I want that to be the chief characteristic of the presence of Christ in my being. I believe that Christ would bring that to every one of us, that's the epitome, that's what he's after. And again, this was not some momentary thing. This was not just for a few moments and it was gone. This was not, oh, we've seen the star, yay, and then it was gone. Somehow they've been elevated to a higher level here. In fact, you see it as you begin to explain what's taking place in verse 10. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. See, this again explains the journey that they've been on. How they could keep going, how they could persevere, because they had this inner state. It's something of the joy that they experienced. How does this apply to us? What level of living are you on? What's the inner state of your mind? What's Jesus done to you? Herod on one hand, wise men on the other hand. What's happening in your life? You have known people, haven't you? I hope it's not a reflection of seeing myself in a mirror. But I have known people who just lived mad, man. They lived mad. They were always mad. Didn't matter what was happening, it was mad. They were mad. They were always negative. They were always down. Nothing was ever right. Hey, if everything was all right, wonder what's going to happen if something did happen. Well, I knew it all the time. They're just mad. They come to church mad. They worship mad. They're just upset. Agitate. It's something's wrong inside. No joy. Now, we're not kidding. We're not talking about happiness, man. We're not talking about an emotion. We're not talking about circumstances. This supersedes circumstances. Has nothing to do with circumstances at all. This is about joy. Oh, the joy that's deep within. Let's look at the concept. it might be intriguing, and you saturated on this, and no doubt you picked up on this, but let me walk you through it just in case. The source of the joy. Now, hey, I want to really be careful here, because I don't want to be misleading, because what I want to say is Jesus is the source of all joy. Yeah, Jesus is the source of all joy. And Jesus doesn't give you joy, He is joy. See, we're death on that. We absolutely will not budge on that. We don't want to leave the wrong impression at all as we talk about this, because we want to focus on Jesus, and we want to be sure that you understand there is nothing but Jesus going on. Jesus is all there is, man. And we don't want to say, oh, there's some kind of other source, because when you trace it all down, the only joy we're going to have is because of this Christ, this living in Jesus. This is the thrust of the whole thing. He is it. Outside of Him, there is nothing. Don't want to talk about anything else but Him. Don't want any kind of song being sung that isn't about Him, man. Don't want to preach a sermon that He's not dead set in the center of it. I'm telling you, Jesus is the only good thing we got to talk about and present. Jesus is it. So I don't want to be misleading here, and I want you to stick with me on this. And I would say up front, He is the source of all joy. And outside of Him, there is no joy. He is the light on the inside. No question about that in my mind at all. And so nail that down. Jesus is the source of all joy. Now, having said that, I want to take you to this passage. And there's an interesting shift that takes place. An interesting connection that happens here. Did you notice in verse 10 that when they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy? Now, of course, what He's really done in this exceeding great joy, that He's taken the idea of joy and He's increased it. It's great joy. But see, it's not just great joy. He's increased it again. It's exceeding great joy. And then on top of that, He's talked about rejoice. They rejoiced in exceeding great joy. So this is really powerful, huge joy. Really powerful. So that's in the verse. But did you notice this joy did not come when they saw the Christ child? See, that's what I would have expected, and probably what I would have written. That they came into the house, and when they saw the Christ child, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. But see, that's not the case in the verse. Look at it carefully. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. In fact, as you move into verse 11, you'll notice that there is no joy mentioned in verse 11 at all. When they had come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary, His mother. They fell down and worshipped Him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented gifts to Him, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And did you notice that in that there's nothing about joy? That worship doesn't have anything connected here about their joy. That worship is about openness. Worship is about submitting. Worship is about offering my gifts. Worship is about generosity. Worship is about falling down. Worship is about being flat on your face before Him. See, those kind of things are all about worship. But joy started way back before they got to the house. Way back before they saw the Christ child. See, it's not connected to seeing the Christ child. Joy was connected with seeing the star. Really interesting insight. And of course you got that in your saturation. Joy took place before they came to the Christ child. Joy is connected to the search. That's an interesting concept, isn't it? That joy is not found at the conclusion. It's not found in the solution. It's not found when, well, everything finally got settled down and I found joy. Well, finally we came to the end of the journey and I found joy. Well, finally I found the answer to the question I've been looking for, and I found joy in that. See, no, you don't. See, joy is a part of the journey. Joy is found in getting there. Joy is all interrelated in the search, in the seeking, in the flowing, in the expanding, in the coming to. See, that's what he's telling us in this. The joy is what took them through the discouraging times when they're 2 years on a camel, man. When they're in that scene, joy is what took them through. See, joy is an intimate, intricate part of the journey, not the conclusion, nor the end or the solution. Joy is a part of the journey itself. See, you find joy in the journey. Did you know God designed us that way? No question in my mind at all. God designed us that way. See, joy is found in stretching. Joy is found in expanding. Joy is found in discovering. Joy is found in investigating. Joy is found in the challenge, man. Joy is found in experiencing. Joy is found in the journey. Joy is found in the search. I'm really concerned about that. And I hope that you can grasp this and get a hold of this for your own inner life and heart. That, see, God wants you to find joy in searching and in stretching and expanding. And see, it's what kills joy is being comfortable. What kills joy is settling. What kills joy is tradition. What kills joy is becoming secure. What kills joy is I've made it. What kills joy is the search is over. What kills joy is kick off your shoes, throw away your walking staff. See, that kills joy. I don't know what you want to do with that. But I know this, that God has not called us to arrive. God has called us to stretch. God has called us to expand. That's what we've been trying to tell you in the whole saturation thing, see? Saturate in His Word, saturate in His person. And what's going to happen, man? He's going to stretch you. And it's in that stretch, it's in that investigation, it's in that perseverance, it's in that getting into, it's in that seeking, it's in that openness, it's in this seeking we've been talking about, this hungering and thirsting deep within your soul. It's in that we find joy. We find joy in the journey, man. Hey, and the minute you arrive, the minute there's no more questions to be answered, the minute you have all you need, the minute you got your theology down, the minute you become stagnant, son, you put a bow around your theology in a little box and set it aside and say, hey, don't need to deal with that anymore. Been through school, got it under my belt, man, I know what I know, and that's the end of that. The minute you get there, hey, you settle, you become bored, joy slips through your fingers. See, joy is found in the box is open. God is bigger than what I know. God is greater than what I can figure out, and He's constantly stretching me into Himself, and the hugeness of the person of Jesus is being revealed to my life, and I'm discovering Him moment by moment and day after day in my life, and it's in that discovery and in that journey that somehow He's able to produce joy within me. See, you've got to have that kind of relationship with this Jesus. Hey, I want you in your own mind and your heart to determine, hey, I want you to commit to this, man. I want you to down to it on your knees, boy. I want you to look God full in the face and say, hey, I'm coming after you. Hey, I want to stretch. I don't care what it costs me. I don't care where it takes me. I don't care what the end result of it is. I don't care where the journey ends up. I'm going to go on this journey. I'm seeking after you. I'm longing for you. I want a revelation of you. I don't care what it changes in me. I don't care if it embarrasses me, smash me, break me, upset everything I've ever known before, teach me everything brand new. Doesn't matter to me. All I know is I want a constant unfolding revelation of your face, dear Jesus. And in knowing you, in stretching in you, in the constant building of my person, in the constant stretching of my mind, I will know the wonder of this kind of joy, exceeding great joy. See, it's found in the journey. God has designed us like that. Now, now think about this. If the joy is found in the search, if joy is found on the journey, then there's a problem with it. Because see, when you come to the end of the journey, oh man, joy is over. Joy is gone. When you find the solution, joy is over. Hey, when you come to the end, joy is done. So, hey, you got joy while you're on the journey, but when the climax of the journey comes to an end, whoa, you're left empty. You're left without joy. But you see, that's why you got to come back to Christ. Because the only thing in all of life that has no end, the only thing that never comes to a conclusion, the only thing that just stretches on and on and on is Him. The only thing you can come up against in your whole life that won't become smaller and smaller and more insignificant as you handle it is Him. The more you handle Him, the more you get into Him, the bigger, the greater, the more He expands. Hey, this is going to be an all-eternity kind of thing. Wow. See, that's why you got to focus on Jesus. That's why you got to go after Him. That's why there is no end to this. Even heaven is going to be about this. See, don't you think for one single moment in your concept of heaven that it's arrival, that it's kick off your shoes, that it's lean back, that it's all over. No, God has designed big purpose and big destiny for you forever. And this life here is just a little tiny bit of the big deal He really wants to pull off, of the real purpose that He's created you for. And heaven is going to be what? An expansion, a constant growing, a constant... Hey, when you get to heaven, you're not going to be omniscient. Come on. You're not going to be all-knowing. If you were, you'd be God. So what are you going to do? You and I are going to spend our entire eternal existence investigating God on the journey, seeking, stretching. And you know what that's going to produce? Exceeding great joy will come out of that, because joy is connected with the journey. Hey, focus on your career. Yeah, get all wrapped up in your career. Hey, you're after it, man. Hey, you're getting the knowledge, you're going after this. Maybe your career is even ministry. So your whole deal is ministry and your career, and what church you're going to pastor, and what evangelism you're going to do, and how big you're going to be, and how great you are, and how well you'll be known, and will you be a second Billy Graham, and you're going after this career, and you're really searching for it, and hey, you got a lot of joy in that, and wow, this is exciting, and this is big, and this is great, and whoopee, and then all of a sudden, man, you're 65, you're 70, your career is over, and what happens to you? Your joy is gone. Your joy is gone. Why? Because you focused on the wrong thing, man. See, careers come to an end. You should have focused on Jesus. You should have gone after Him. He could have stretched. He'll take you through 70, 80, 90 years of age. He'll take you on into eternity. It's the journey after Him. It just stretches. It goes on, seeking Him. See, the joy is found in the journey. Hey, be an athlete, man. That's the joy of my life. Being an athlete, man. I'm playing ball, man. I go into the pros, but whoa. Hey, now you're too old. You're only 35, 40, but now you're too old. The athletics is gone, man. Your joy. You can't participate. You're not out there in the heat of it anymore. Hey, it's done. The joy. See, you came to an end. That's temporary. See, don't focus on the temporary. You getting this? Hey, you get all wrapped up in the finances and making money, and you got a joy in that, and you're developing, and you're seeing your assets grow, and you're really getting with it. But come on, even that comes to an end. Don't you get it? You die, and you take nothing with you, man, and your joy is gone. That's why you got to focus on Him. See, the wise men, joy was found in the search. Verse 10, in the search. Their search is for Christ, and that was their joy. Hey, the unfolding of the new King. That's what they were after. That's what they found. Man, I love that. And that's what I want to challenge you with. Again, we're back to the basic premise of this whole thing, that Christology is not some kind of academic pursuit. It's not, oh, we're going to learn facts about Jesus, who He is. Oh, yes, we do want to do that, but you see, what we're really after is not facts about Him and who He is, and not just an historical Christ and memorize all that stuff. What we're really after is, oh, I want to know Him. I want to know Him. I want to get into His Word, living Word. I want to get into the written Word. And I want those two to come together to be a constant expansion. And in that, you know what happens? The lights are on in the inside. The face begins to radiate. The excitement of the life begins to permeate. My world begins to sense it. Evangelism begins to take place. Joy becomes the result of that. So you got to get into this. And so, as we come to the end of this last class period, hey, if you haven't gotten that, then you've missed the whole point. If that hasn't become reality in your life, man, hey, we've wasted our time. You just got a grade, man. That's all you got. If you didn't get this. That somehow, some way, the delight of the whole thing is the unfolding of the reality of His being. And in the saturation in His Word, and the saturation of His living Word and the written Word, you begin to experience Him, and He reveals Himself to you, and you know Jesus in intimacy, and the display of His very person begins to flow through you, and you experience exceeding great joy, rejoicing in exceeding great joy, as He literally unfolds your life, His life, through you to your world, and evangelism takes place. So commit yourself. Commit yourself to the search. Commit yourself to, oh, I'm after you, Jesus. I love you, but I'm not satisfied with how I know you. Hey, I want intimacy with you. Go after that, man. Commit yourself to that. Day in and day out. Oh, I want to know you more.